So, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon if you are from the subcontinent, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or other parts of the world where it is already midday. Sorry. My name is Dr. Abid Ali Khan, as you all know, and I have over 10 years of experience in the academia, working as an assistant professor in Comsets University of Islamabad, and also have a lot of experience of working in Singapore, Malaysia, Spain, Germany. Recently, I have left academia and now working as scientist, R&D or flow cytometry specialist scientist in a Japanese company here in Germany. But because of a lot of experience of teaching and guiding students all around my academic career, I have decided to start this webinar series in which the first series we would like to do a webinar on how to write a CV and a motivation letter. As we know, it's very important to write a good CV, write a good motivation letter to stand out. And this is the first point of selection for either it's a process of admission or you are already having an admission but you are looking for scholarship, you are looking for a placement, you are looking for some kind of a funded position, or it could also be applied to jobs because a lot of jobs, a number of jobs, they also require this CV and motivation letter. Next, I will do another webinar in which we will specifically work on what's the difference between applying for an academic position, the CV that you apply for an academic position, and then the CV that you would like to use in applying for a job. In this webinar, I would like to inform you that most of the slides that you would see, I would have some PowerPoint slides. I have taken them from these famous career websites, from these famous career books. But the thing is, to understand them and to explain them and how to apply them, that's the trickiest part. And this is what I am going to do this seminar or webinar for. So let's start. Okay, now I would like to go to. We start from CV. So, talking about CV, what is a CV? Well, the abbreviation is it's curriculum vitae. But what is a curriculum vitae? For example, you want to pursue and follow a career in research or academia, or you may need to apply for a job after completing your bachelor's if you are from the United States of America, or in countries like Germany, Europe, other parts of Europe, or countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal, Australia, New Zealand, where most of the jobs come after the degree of master's. So, if you want to follow a career either in research or academia or any other industry, it will require you to make a CV and apply with the CV. This will CV, your CV would be a combination of your scholarly accomplishments. For example, if you have a lot of papers publication, if you have a lot of other related work with research, or if you have a very good educational history, you have done a lot of internships, you have done many things. Albeit, if you have done none of these, you still need a CV because for fresh starters, this is also needed to show. And if you're a fresh starter, most of your chances are dependent on how good you present yourself and how good you did in your school, in your educational history. On average, recruiters just need 2 minutes on a CV if it's an academic CV, and if it's a CV for industrial jobs, then 6 to 10 seconds on CV, and then they will either give you a chance or not. So this means CV is very important to make this first impression on the recruiters. What is the difference between a CV and a resume? Okay, this is a little tricky, but in most of the cases, if you are outside United States of America and Canada, then this is not relevant. It is interchangeably used. So a CV is a resume and a resume is a CV. So if you are not applying for a job, again, this is very important. If you are not applying for a job, then this does not matter. But if you are applying for a job in the States or in Canada, then you have to see what are they asking. So if they are asking to submit a resume, then you have to submit a resume. And if they are asking to submit a CV, then you have to submit a CV. But this is only for jobs. If you're applying for academic positions, for example, a funded PhD position, a postdoc position, research assistant position, research associate position, another position like this in the research academia, then there you would need a CV. The basic difference between a resume and a CV is the resume is more inclined towards your experience rather than your basic educational background and your qualifications. I have an example that I would show you in the end of a resume and a CV, and then you could see it how it is. So this is very important to understand. But again, as I explained, in many of the cases, a CV and a resume. For example, if you want to apply for a job in Germany, if you want to apply for a PhD position in France, if you want to apply for a postdoc in Sweden or Norway, CV and resume, both of them will be fine as long as you have drafted them good. The next important point is a template. So now we could see the template. It's very important that you start with your name and your contact. Now, for all those of my viewers right now, I do not see how many of you are already there. I have no idea how many more would come, and I have no idea when I place the recording of this webinar how many of you would see. But my focus a little would be towards my experience that comes from working with students from Pakistan, especially India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. So I would say Southeast Asia, then Asia. Even I have experience working with Chinese, Indonesian, Malaysian, Vietnamese, Thailand, these students. And of course, with some other students from countries like Turkey, Albania, Kosovo, Yugoslavia regions. So my focus would be more on those mistakes that these students do. And I would tell you that the first mistakes that our students do that have that are coming from the subcontinent, Asia, I would say, they write their name, they write their father name, they write their domicile, they write their Russian card number, they write their CNIC number, they write all these things on the CV. These things may or may not be important in your local jobs, but you never ever, nobody is interested what is your father's name, where do you live, are you single or not, do you have kids or not. So these things are not relevant in a CV. So the first part in a CV is that whenever I receive CV from my previous students or from some acquaintances from Pakistan, India, Asia, China, Malaysia, they have this information in their CV. Do not give any information. So you just give your name, you just give your address, you do not give your complete address. For example, right now I am in Potsdam city of Germany, so I would say Potsdam, Germany. That's my address. I'm not gonna tell you which is my apartment number, on which street it is. No, it's not necessary. In some cases, you can also not provide your mobile phone number. Just provide your email. So like in this one is Janet Chobot, for example, Shanghai, China, and janet1457 at the rate of gmail.com. Perfectly fine. Then the next part, very important, is the summary. This is another tricky part. If I see a CV of my friend and I see the summary, oh, this is beautiful summary. What would I do? I will just copy those lines and chip them in my CV. This is very common. And I do not say this that students do it because they cannot write their own summaries, but they are under the impression that if a line looks beautiful on a CV, on any other CV, it will also do the same for me, which is a very wrong concept. You are unique in yourself. Every CV is unique in a special way. What is relevant for Mr. Janet or Miss Janet might not be relevant for you. So I would always say sit, practice, practice, practice. Keep writing these lines on the summary. This should be a collective summary of where you come from, what have you done, what are your experiences. So when I say what have you done means your educational background. What are your professional experiences, and how can you add value based on all these important points to the company where you're applying or to the scholarships where you're applying. So a summary would be like, I belong from a rural region of, let's say, Haripur, KP, Pakistan, had achieved masters in microelectronics in, let's say, Thailand University of Technology, have 4 years of experience working with Gigafactory Tesla in Baden-Württemberg, Germany, and looking to be a part of your dynamic team, bringing so things like this. You write your own summary. The next one is professional history. Now this is going to be a little difference here. You have to realize when you are working for applying for a job, then you can write your professional history before educational history. But when you are applying for a scholarship or for an admission in a university or for a research position, they are the recruiters or the selection committee is more interested to see your education than your professional history. But if you're applying for a company, for a job, then there two things are more important. So let me repeat this. You are applying for a job in a company. Your CV should focus on two things. The major focus would be your professional history. This means your previous experience and your skills. So that's what is important. The education would come down in the end. So like the fourth or the fifth tab could be education. But when you apply for a scholarship, when you apply for a master position, or you apply for a PhD position, or let's say you want to apply for a postdoc position, there I think you should mention your educational history first. For example, you're applying for a master funded master position, so you should start with your bachelor's, then your maybe college, and maybe your school. So you should also start with the chronological. The chronological means the latest, the last education that you completed should comes on first. So for example, if I would do it, my PhD is the latest, so I would first mention my PhD, then my master's, then my bachelor's and other stuff. Skills, again, this is very important. You cannot use a generalized CV for every position. This is very important. This is why it becomes so hectic. Applying for jobs and applying for positions and applying for scholarships is a full-time job in itself. So skills, you mentioned all your skills here, but this is very important. For example, I have this a pet example which all of my students, all of my friends, they got coached by me. They know I am a person. My name is, let's say, Mr. Donald, not Trump. Well, maybe. And I have skills in, let's say, I'm very good in making painting the walls. I'm great in making videos. I'm great in public speaking. And a person who wants to paint his new house comes to me and I start, oh, I'm a great public speaker. Oh, I make so wonderful videos. And he would be like, huh, okay. And does he need that? No. Who will he pick? He will pick someone who can paint the best way. Now, the thing is, I have three skills here, and all three skills I'm wonderful. But the person who am I selling my skills at this particular moment, is he interested in video making? No. Is he interested in public speaking? No, he does not care. He just wants his house as a home to be painted well. So what I would say, oh, I'm one of the best painter. I have painted the walls of the United Nations office in Geneva. I painted the complete building for the new gigafactory of Tesla in Germany. I painted the CEO room of BioNTech in Magdeburg. So now, this is very important. If you want to apply for a job or a scholarship where they ask for particular skills, you have that skills, but you have a lot of more skills. Then you either write those skills that are not relevant right below, because somebody who wants to see and he picks your CV and he's like, oh yeah, this guy has this skill. Oh, he has this skill too. Oh, we look for this too. And then in the end, you might or might not mention those skills which are not so relevant. It was like, okay, I can do this, but that's fine. We don't care. He can or he cannot. Awards and achievements is the next. So this is very important for skills, for scholarships, for admissions, for funded positions, for postdocs, for PhDs, for jobs. Everywhere, the skills are very important. You might be having 3,000 skills. There are very nice people in the world who are extremely talented. But if out of these 300, only 15 are needed for a particular position, you would enlist those 15 on the top, because when the recruiter or when the professor sees the CV and he says skills, we need somebody who can do data mining in language R. Oh, right, this guy can do it. And we would prefer somebody who could do also some programming in basic Java. And then the next tab of your skills is advanced programming in Java. It's like, oh wow, this guy also knows this. But imagine if I have these two skills and I put them right in the down, and the professor sees, oh, he's a very good goldsmith. Oh, he has metallurgical skills. Maybe after 4 or 5 skills, he will throw your CV. So this is why changing your CV for every position is very important. Awards and achievements, again, this is the same. The relevant awards and achievements should be up there. For example, if somebody wants coach for sports, and you had been coaching a junior team that has won so many awards, or even not so many awards, but they have won. So you will mention that, and they were like, oh, we are looking for a sports coach. This guy had been training the junior teams, and he took the team from position 7 to position 3. So he has skills. Similarly, published works. The published works, normally we do it year-wise. This is common in academia, I know. It's research articles. But of course, what you can do, you can just write selected publications. So when you write selected publications, it means you have more than these publications. And there you write only of the papers that are directly connected to this particular role. And then in the end, you can also provide a link of your Google Chrome or Google Scholar or your other like ResearchGate or all these other platforms where all of your papers are enlisted. You do not need to provide all of your papers, because I have seen people with a master's and more than 100 papers. Nobody's interested in reading all of your 100 papers. Just enlist 4, 5, 6 the relevant ones, and then give the list. Okay. This is I would just give the link in the end when I have this YouTube webinar saved. This is about some skills. So this is the PAR statement. This is more for the jobs than for the scholarships. So this is like the project, the action, and the results. So it's like you have a project, you have to design an action, and then you have to talk about the results. So this is like I organized a review session for 15 participants and scored practice test leading a team in the top 5 finishes in Arizona State. So this is the project organization of a review, and then the action, like there were 15 participants, they were practice test, and then the result was like finishing in the top 5 in Arizona State. So this is an example from, and this is an example from a book that I have, and you can review this later on. This is very good. In the CV, normally we highly recommend action verbs. Action verbs are very important. So like management skills, administered, analyzed, assigned. So people who are not native speakers, for example, I'm not a native speaker. Many of you watching are not native speakers. So these action verbs can really help you. For example, we have a tendency to write determined, did a good job, doing. So instead of that, you could also use this skill. For example, assigned, for example, chair, developed, evaluated. So like evaluated is a word that is very good instead of tested. So you would say tested, I tested, or tested 100 samples. So you could say evaluated 100 samples. So these are action verbs. It's very important. This was about CV, most of it. I'm not going into too much details. What I would like to do now is to show you a CV example. So I would go here, and here we would see. Now, this is a PhD resume sample, because I believe, I hope I'm right, most of the audience today, they are interested in getting, again, you see I'm using the word getting. That's not an action verb. So I would use an action verb. For example, most of the audience that are watching right now, they are interested in the achievement of master's or PhD or postdoc funded positions. So this is for a PhD sample, resume sample. Now this says resume, but it could also be a CV in case if you are not in the States. Now you see it has this, he's a mechanical engineer. You can write this or you cannot write this, and you should write your name here. So instead of mechanical engineer, you can write your name. And this is the address. You could also write not this 1177 Mass Avenue, you just write Cambridge and the phone number and the email. Normally this is a landline number. These days landline numbers are kind of very not, people are not interested in landline, so you can list your mobile phone and you can list your email. In some cases you can also avoid your mobile phone. Then there's a summary, if you could see. So extensive experience with applying analytical and numerical methods, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to read this, but you can afterwards pause the video and read it. And I will also give a link of this document in the description, and then you can download it. This is a wonderful, wonderful handbook. It's a career handbook from University of Massachusetts. And I highly recommend this to read and go through this. And now, since I told you in the previous section that it's a PhD, so he's applying for a PhD position, I think. Now he already has a PhD, so he is actually he's enlisting the skills of education first. Okay, I think I messed it up. Yeah. So now you could see education, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the PhD dissertation, everything else is written. Then he comes to experience, and then he mentions experience in a time chronological manner, 2011, 2007, 2010 to 11, and eventually he comes to fellowships and awards, professional and public service, publication and conference, and here he has just like 2 first author, 10 co-author, 2 conference publications. You could also do this. Again, I have a very pet sentence towards my students. If you have not achieved so far a Nobel Prize, which you didn't have, I am sure your CV should not be more than one page and a half if you already have a PhD degree. But if you already have a bachelor's or a master's degree, then I think your CV should be one page max. Sorry. I will provide this link in the end of the in the description, so you could go through all these details in this handbook. It will be really, really handy for you guys. Okay, so now we go back to our next topic, is what is a motivation letter? So motivation letter, what is the difference between a motivation letter and a cover letter? It's a tricky point. We will discuss this too. A motivation letter, it's a very personal document. So if I have a motivation letter, this is going to be directly connected to me. I'm going to talk about me. That's it. How can I bring values? The company or the scholarship university or the scholarship group is giving you the scholarship. That's their offer. When you want to write a motivation letter, the purpose of motivation letter is it's a give and take. It's give and take. They are giving you, and the professor is giving you a scholarship, or the university scholarship committee is giving you a scholarship, but they just don't want to give the scholarship. They also want to take something from you. What can you bring to the table? What can you bring to the group, to the research group? What can you bring to the university? This is very important. And this is a document that is a combination of your professional skills and the reasons why, how, what if. There's a very important phenomena. This is called the learning diamond. So the learning diamond, it's a diamond. It starts from what, how, why, what if, and then if you learn the learning diamond, I will also give a link about the learning diamond in the description. It will be really helpful if you read about that and then you write your motivation letter. It will become much easier. So you want to apply for a job, you want to apply for a scholarship, you want to apply for a position for a master's admission somewhere in a university and a research center, you need a motivation letter. And instead of a motivation letter, when you apply for a job, it's not a motivation letter. They call it a cover letter. Again, in some countries, in some companies, even in some universities, these words like the motivation letter and the cover letter, they are going to be interchangeably used. So a cover letter might mean a motivation letter, and a motivation letter might mean a cover letter. Sorry. Sorry, give me a minute. Okay, so when you are applying for paid job applications, normally they ask you to write for a cover letter rather than a motivation letter. But I have over 10 years of experience applying for different jobs, different positions, and I have seen that in the academia, even when you apply for a professorship, they might write a motivation letter rather than write cover letter. Interchangeably used. How do you structure a killer motivation letter? I would like to tell you at the end of this session, we will go to a job, we will go to a website, we will find a position, and we will try to structure a motivation letter for that position. And I will use myself as an example for that. So I will look for positions where I have my expertise, I have my educational background relevant. I will not write a complete letter, but I will give you hints and tips, like how would I write a motivation letter for this particular position. So it should have an outline, it should have an introduction, it should have an expansion of the outline, and a conclusion. Proofreading is always very important. This is something that I personally, at young age, maybe at your age, I would say, you were all young guys watching me. At a young age, I was not so much into this, and I tell you that was a mistake. And I would really, really, really suggest you guys, recommend you guys not to do this mistake. Proofread, 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 proofread. When you proofread, the more you proofread, you will find mistakes and you will make your CV and your motivation letter better. You will always correct mistakes, you will always make it better. The more and the more practice, the more and the more you would like, you would have a better motivation letter. Why do you think I'm here doing this webinar and you are listening? Because I might have written in my life more than 1,000 motivation letters already. Yeah, more than 1,000 for sure, way more. And every time I had written, the next time I was better. This is how I felt. This is the process. Practice makes a man perfect. So, what is an outline? The outline is like in a motivation letter, you should write a bit about. This is how I suggest that you come across a position that is empty in a group, in a university, in a company, and you write about that. And you say, I saw this position, suppose in somewhere in on a website, nature.com, naturejobs.com, sciencejobs.com, Euraxis.com. I saw it on the university website. Then you give an introduction. The introduction is like about yourself. One mistake that a lot of people do is they explain their CV in a motivation letter, which is totally wrong. Well, which is not totally wrong, but it's not good, because what your CV says should not be explained in detail in your motivation letter. I will explain what do I mean. So after an introduction, for example, my introduction is that, like, I hold a PhD in molecular biology and biomedicine, and I had been working over 10 years in academia, and currently I am in a scientific role in industry. And based on my qualifications and experiences, I would like to prove that I am one of the best candidates. So this is not the formal. You do not write these lines like what I said, but this is the metaphor. How do you write? And then on the expansion of the outline, you go for the specific skills which I told you. For example, I'm giving my example. I'm applying for a professorship in a university. They are looking for someone who had been working with nanoscale nanomaterials from biological origin, and they want treatment and encapsulation in novel liposomal deliveries. So I would write, I had a lot of papers. I had a PhD in the nanoscale technology. I had been working with the synthesis, application, and characterization of nanoparticles during my PhD. I was involved in synthesis of iron oxide nanoparticles, gold nanoparticles, platinum nanoparticles. We not only achieved very good synthesis, but we had performed an extensive characterization of the nanoparticles on scanning electron microscopy, transmission electron microscopy, um, X-ray absorption X-ray absorption spectroscopy, application on bacterial cells, on human mammalian cells, and then we were also able to publish all this in high impact factor journals. So all these things that are connected to what is asked. Now, these are not only skills that I have. I had been doing a lot in multiple drug resistance field. I had been doing a lot in the point of care diagnostics for the last 4 years. I had done a lot of work in microbiology. I had done a lot of work in ethnobotany. So ethnobotany is the branch where you use plant extracts, either methanolic extracts or water extracts. You use them for a number of purposes. I use them for nanoparticle synthesis. I use them for uh, checking their efficacies against many other drug-resistant bacteria, yeast, fungi, protozoans, helminthes. But you see, I'm not talking about any of these skills in the expansion of the outline. Why? Because they are looking for someone which where these skills are not relevant. So I'm not going to talk about them. Maybe I will mention a bit of them in the CV, or maybe in the introduction, or maybe in the expansion of outline. I write a few more words like I also hold a lot of expertise and experience in the fields of microbiology, ethnobotany, and blah blah blah, which could be effective for having a collaboration with other groups. So yet these things we have to discuss it like this, and in the conclusion, you wrap the motivation letter in the conclusion like, based on the aforementioned skills, qualifications, experiences, and achievements, I believe that I am one of the best candidates for your position. Some of the motivation letter could also be like, you could also already ask for one-to-one meeting. You could say this in the letter, in the job application letter, or in the, even when it's a group position for a PhD. So this is also possible, but normally formally it's sorry, it's not favorable. Okay, in the motivation letter there is the three W's: Pakistanis, Indians, and Sri Lankans, and Bangladeshi, and English, and Australians, and New Zealanders, and South Africans. We all know about the two W's, the Waqar Yunus and Wasim Akram W's, two W's. Here we talk about three W's, but this doesn't have to do anything with cricket or bowling. This is why, what, and again why. So like, why do you want to join the scholarship program? Why do you want to apply for this position? Why? You have to show your motivation why. For example, I want to be a part of this dynamic group. For example, if it's a position by a professor, that professor already has a Nobel Prize. He has won a Nobel Prize, and you want to say like, I will be honored to work under a professor who has a Nobel Prize, who has been doing so good that the whole world has recognized his achievements. And of course, when I work under a professor like this, there will be so much to learn. So this is one motivation. Another motivation is, for example, Max Planck Institutes in Germany. You want to apply for this Impress position, and your motivation is, I want to get my doctorate degree from one of the Max Planck Institutes because they are one of the best in the world. Every year, 1, 2, or 3 Nobel Prizes are won by Max Planck. For example, in the last 4 years, at least one is actually won by them. And how can you do this? You could go to Max Planck Institute. You could see why or about us, why to join us or about us. There, you could see the facts about them, and you take the facts from there. So using their website, you hit them with their own facts. This would show that you are motivated to know about them, and actually you know about them because you read about them and you write in their own words. Then again, the next one is the personal skills and qualities that you have that will benefit the institution. I explained this in a great detail with my example with the nanoparticles stuff. I did not talk about all the things that are not relevant. I might be better on those skills, but since they are not needed, I'm not going to talk about them. Or even if I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to talk about them not so much. And then why in this specific institution or group, or so these are all interchangeable. Or you could see like when you take these three W's, you will structure your motivation letter in a much better way. But you have to be very clear and specific in this case. So like here, the generalized example won't work. You have to be very, very clear. For example, if you want to work in the group of Professor, let's say, I don't know, the woman that won Nobel Prize for Charpentier, Leah Charpentier, the one of the professors in Max Planck in Berlin, in here in Germany, who won a Nobel Prize for CRISPR-Cas. So you have to be specific. Why do you want to work with her? Okay, this is also very important. Sorry. It's very important that you follow the guidelines. In some cases, not all cases, in some cases, you would have a motivation letter where they will tell you, write it in this way, write in these points. So you have to actually follow them. Sometimes people say, they said write in 1 page, and even if I write 1.5 page, it's okay. No, it's not. Stick to the guidelines. Just stick to them. Don't go away from these guidelines. And in most of the cases, there will be no details. So a motivation letter for you, if you have a bachelor degree, okay, let me categorize. If you have a bachelor degree and you want for the motivation for a master's admission or application, do not go more than 1/3 of a page. So like 1/2, a bit more than 1/2 is okay. If you have a master's and you're applying for a PhD position, stick to 1 page, but if it's less than 1 page, a bit less than 1 page, I would say 0.8%, 80% of 1 page is perfectly fine. With a 12 point and the normal spacing. The best fonts are Times New Royal, Times New Roman, Arial, also Garamond is very good. I like Garamond. The font does not matter, but still, these are one of the majorly accepted fonts. If you're applying for, if you already have a PhD degree and you are applying for a postdoc, stick to 1 page. Maybe you can just increase the borders a bit more, but a motivation letter writing more than 1 page is nobody's gonna read that. So stick to 1 page. This is very important because I had been in the selection committees of some positions in our group, and I had seen motivation letters of 2.5 pages from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand. I mean, I was a senior level postdoc and a junior faculty member in the German university in the south of Germany near Stuttgart. I was not a professor. The professor was way above me. And I did not have time to read these 2.5 pages of motivation letter. How can you assume the professor to have so much time and stamina to write a motivation letter of 2.5 pages? Stick to 1 page or less than 1 page is perfect. Write with your personality. As I told you, motivation letter is extremely personal and it's extremely specific. So use it like if you are talking to a person, like I'm talking to you. I worked in Stuttgart in FU Berlin University, and I was working on multiple drug resistant bacteria, and my major goal was to work how persistence could develop into resistance. And in this we use a number of Salmonella models. So you see, you do not have to go general. Be specific, be personal, and make it like you are talking to the person and that person is sitting right in front of you. I know this is easily done, easily said than done, but practice will make you perfect. So every day make your practice, and proofread. Okay, you can also include interesting details that help your motivation, and try to avoid humor. You never write humor. My motivation letter is always a very serious thing, so do not write any humor in this. Okay, this is another thing which proofreading will tell you. Some people have very good English skills, really good English skills. They have a very good vocabulary, and they use words that are really not grasped by everyone. Remember, I had been an eye example or an eyewitness to a motivation letter that was drafted like beautiful for a master's position scholarship in one of the prestigious scholarships. I'm not going to tell you which one, but it was one of them. And when I reviewed the letter, I was like, wow, this is some kind of English written by Winston Churchill. But I also gave an advice to the person who wrote that letter that your selection is not going to be based on the English that you have written. It's going to be on your motivation. So it does not mean if one person have been using simpler words and the other person has been using words that everyone has to open a dictionary and see, hey, what's the meaning of this word? Ah, it means this. And that person would get the scholarship. In 99% cases, no. The simpler to understand, the more efficient it is. But it has to be simple yet elegant, as I told you throughout this webinar. So do not go for fancy words. Go for action words in the list that I told you. The action words are better, not the fancy words. Do not write Winston Churchill type of English. It's not an English competition. It's not an English language competition. Yes, if you are applying for a position for a language instructor or for English language instructor or for English language PhD or English language faculty member, then it will make a difference. But 99% of you are not English language people I know. You are either scientists or engineers or management scientists or social scientists or humanities guys. So it doesn't matter. Stick to simpler words and practice will make it much better for you. Short sentences and active sentences, and use third person voice. This is very important. I forgot to write here, but use third person voice. Never use, well, you can use a bit, but try to avoid I. I flew the plane. I saved the world. I am the best. I applied these skills, techniques. I achieved the best results. Try to avoid this. Right. For example, an effective strategy was designed and applied, and promising results were achieved. It's the third person passive voice. No. Forget about I, you, we, they. No. You do not say this. I went there, I saw, and I was like, no, this is not going to be done like this. And then I performed these tasks, and then I did this. And in the end, I was successful. This would make your motivation letter a little too much egoistic. Not egoistic, but, too much like into me, no. Instead, use the third person voice. For example, a group of 15 students were led. They were split into further subgroups of 5 students each. Each group was given a task to perform the biometry on the leaves of pines in the forest of, Kansas or Sawat or Malaysia. The results were managed, or the statistical analysis were performed using R, language R, and it was found out that the trend was intact throughout the leaves of this particular forest. So do not use the word I. Sometimes you can use we, but try to avoid it. Focus on your strength. Do not talk about your limitations. At the moment, we are talking about our positive points. Everyone has negative points. So in the motivation letter, just don't talk about limitations. And this point has already been explained in detail. So you have to reveal the strengths, and you have to make them think what you bring to the group, what you bring to the company, what you bring to the university. This is very important. Think about it. What are your unique strengths? Think about it. What are your unique strengths that are relevant in this particular case? For case to case, it will change. So this is my advice. Normally I do not use the word advice, I use either suggestion or recommendation, but here it's my advice, nasihat in Urdu. Whenever you apply for a different job, for a different position, for a different PhD, for a different postdoc, change your CV, change your motivation letter with the general motivation letter, with the general CV. If you keep on applying for different position, it might work, but majority of the cases, more than 90% of the cases, it's not going to work, because you have to change the skills, you have to change the motivation letter depending on what is asked in that particular case. Okay, it's a template, motivation letter template. For example, it's I taken it from internet, so it's not mine, but it's a good one. That's why I took it from Indeed.com. It's the website. And my name, you can start like this, but not necessarily. My name is Fly and I'm a position, and I writing to apply for a scholarship, blah 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 blah. So now this is the introduction that we said. This is the outline, and now this is the outline explained. What I would say, I mean, the outline is okay, the introduction is okay, but you should talk about that I am writing to apply for this scholarship, and I would rather like to see when you apply for the scholarship, where did you see the scholarship ad? It's kind of important. The next thing is very important, is you should write the name of the person to whom you are addressing this. So like before the dear Mr. Miss, yeah, here it is, and then in the end you write your name, and then you can write your address, and this is the conclusion. I would write a little more about the expansion of the outline. So it's say, I feel I would be an asset to your. So these kind of things you would be learning on based on your practice. I would show you a letter with you. So now I show you a motivation letter example from the handbook again. So here we are, and I would go to this now again. So this is the handbook that I was telling you, and it has, so like you can see, it has all these CVs. You can take the formats from it and you can use it. So I will give the link. It's free to download in the end. It's a very, very important thing, and it will really help you. Okay, now cover letters. So as I told you, the cover letter and the motivation letter, they are interchangeably used. And now this is what is important. So this is you, okay? This Jane Doe, this is you. This is you. So you write your name and your address, right? Now this is you, the yellow highlighted. Normally I would write not my name in generally, I would just write my address, again not complete address, and then I would write my email, and that's it, nothing else. But here I would like to write the name of the person to whom I am. So I would make it red. I would like to write the name of the recruiter or the professor, and I would like to go to the internet and see what is his position. He's a professor, he's the group leader, and his address. Not complete address, but for example, University of Manchester, Department of Biochemistry, Manchester, UK. That's it. And date. Date is very important. So here I would write a date at the top of, before this Jane Dane, I would write a date. And then dear Professor Dr. I don't know, Ronald or something. And then you can see like this is a very detailed one, because this guy would be very experienced, but you can see it's the opening. In this case, it's a bit long in this example. Again, when somebody is very experienced, it could be like this. Then this is the outline and the explanation of the outline. And so this is the conclusion. Through my experiences at Putnam, blah, 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 blah. And in the end, diverse technical and business background to best fit the current needs and the future ventures of Deloitte. Deloitte is a company. So this handbook has a number of examples. This is another example. You can see it's another one, and there are many cover letters and motivation letters like this in this handbook, which I would give you at the end of, well, I would put the link in the description of this webinar. Okay, now I want to go to my Chrome and I want to go to Eurexis. So Eurexis. Okay, so I go to Eurexis home, and from here I say to job and funding and say go to find jobs. Okay, and here I want to say, let's say PhD microbiology, and I don't say any country, so I'm just postdoc position in chemical microbiological hazards of no. Okay, molecular biology of bacterial biofilms. This is very good. This is in Switzerland. So I'm going to open this. Now this is the position that I opened, and you could see the requirements, and in the requirements, or maybe where to apply, it should be how to apply, I think. Let me see. So it's in Basel, and in this position, okay, here. So you could see now the name of the professor is Knut Drescher. So when I write a motivation letter, I would write, Dear Professor Knut Drescher, or you could also say, Dear Professor Drescher, the surname. So their focus is on understanding the development and functions of bacterial biofilms, particularly in the context of human infections. Now, look, this is something very important. Now, they're working on bacterial biofilms. So I personally, as I told you, I have experience. So I will talk about bacterial biofilms. What kind of experience do I have about biofilms? So now, what I will do, I will write here in the Word file, biofilms, human infections, and they work on clinical or control samples, antibiotic resistant tolerant bacterial communities, chronic. Okay, now this is the most important part. We are looking for highly motivated and talented PhD students to join our lab. A master's degree in biology, biochemistry, biotechnology, bioengineering, and a similar discipline is required. In addition, expertise in molecular microbiology is required. Knowledge in one or more of the following topics is beneficial: biochemistry, metabolism, RNA, host pathogen interactions, and infection biology. So now, if I want to write a motivation letter for this, where should I focus? So I would be focusing on biofilms and human infections. And now I have a lot of experience of biofilms with clinical samples. This is something I did when I was an assistant professor in ComSets. So I would go for clinical infections, and then they say molecular microbiology. This was one thing, and then they were also saying RNA biology, and the ad also said that they would prefer somebody who has experience of bacterial genetics. So let's write bacterial genetics. Now, sorry. This is more or less what they are looking for. So when I write my CV, what I will do here, So I would mention my previous experience with biofilms, right? So again, this is all based on, I would say, based on this is based on my experience. So I'm writing about myself. So I will mention my previous example with biofilms. Of course, I had done a lot of work with biofilms. So I would mention about we had hospital, or let's say clinical samples, where what we did, we measured and determined. Again, this is not an action word. If I want to write an action word, I would go to the list, as I told you, and I will write the action word for this. Biofilm forming versus biofilm non-forming bacterial isolates. This is something we did based on staining purposes. So we didn't did any molecular biology. Also, the next I did was biofilm producing bacterial pathogens, killing via gold and silver nanoparticles. This is something I had done. We had already published it. And also vancomycin gold conjugates. This is something I did. So now I'm going to write what is relevant in my experience towards this position and making a list. How can I write now human infections? So as I told you, we had samples from human sputum, from blood, from urine. All these samples we have from different hospitals of Pakistan. Majorly they were from Peshawar, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, and some of them were from Jhelum as well. So we had these human infections, and we had these samples from different human samples from different hospitals. So I will talk about this. The clinical and the human infections, they are the same. So I will kind of mix and blend together with human infections because they are one and the same thing. Okay, now the next is molecular microbiology. Do I have any experience of molecular biology? Of course, I had studied. So I had studied 2 courses in great detail. Studied 2 courses in in masters, and they were prokaryotic molecular microbiology. Then I studied eukaryotic molecular microbiology. This is something I did during my masters. The next one is just hang on a sec. I had done my master thesis in molecular microbiology, where I was working with yeasts, and I had done the GLN, working on the GLN gene. I had also a lot of experience in bacterial and yeast genetic engineering, which is molecular microbiology. I had also supervised student thesis where we had work on PCR mediated genetic identification. That is also molecular microbiology of strains using the, so all these things I'm going to note down. Okay, then RNA biology, I have some experience working with RNA biology, which is connected to RT-PCR mediated diagnosis, where you isolate the RNA, and then of course you convert it to DNA, and then you perform the diagnosis. I have some experience of RNA biology. When I was working, I had a small project with siRNA, with miRNA, and with shRNA for gene silencing of human cancers. This is something I have some experience. And then this is all the bacterial genetics is the same as above, I would say. So I would just try to mention it and blend it together. Blend it together with molecular microbiology. So this is what I have written now. This is going to be my motivation letter for this particular position. And as you see, I'm not going to be fulfilling all of the requirements for this PhD position. Let me show you again this PhD position. Here it is. I'm not going to be fulfilling all of this, but I have a master's degree in biology, and I have expertise in molecular microbiology, and I have expertise in biochemistry and some RNA biology, bacterial genetics, some host pathogen interaction and infection biology. So based on this, I think I have 7.5 to 8 by 10, and I would definitely apply. And the next thing that I want to see is that the professor Knut is more focused on the development of functional bacterial biofilms, particularly in the context of human infections, using controlled laboratory experiments or clinical samples. And okay, I must write that I have a lot of work in antibiotic resistance as well, in antibiotic persistence in biofilms. This is very important that I forgot. Bacterial community that are cause of many chronic and acute infections, but biofilms are a model system for understanding basic aspects. So all these things, okay, this is very important. Broad set of topics investigated within the research group and require background molecular biology. The exact projects are flexible and will be developed with Professor Dr. Knut. So this is how I would actually write my motivation letter, and this is how I would change my CV, because if I change my CV just like I wrote these, mentioned these skills. Let me give you an example again. So if I have this, what I would do, how would I mention skills? Mention skills in the CV. So how would I mention my skills in the CV? So I would say biofilms. So you could say analysis of biofilms, isolation, investigation, and propagation. So like you also know how to propagate biofilms. Similarly, I would the next name will be molecular microbiology, I would say, and here I could also write some examples that I did in molecular microbiology skills. The third I would say RNA biology. Here I could also write some skills. So here I could skill so I would say diagnosis. I have experience in diagnosis, diagnostics, identification, and I would say that was metabolism, which I did in my master thesis. So now you can see the difference here. This is what I wanted to see, I wanted to show. Here I write biofilms analysis, isolation, investigation, propagation, but this is the CV. And when I write all these things in my motivation letter, I'm becoming extremely personal, and I'm telling what I did. I'm not repeating this. I know how to analyze biofilms, and I am very good in isolation and investigation of the biofilms and how to propagate them. No, I'm telling them what I did with biofilms. So this is how this should look like in the end, and this is more or less how you will get it. I believe with practice you will come to know all these things. And this is going to be the end of my webinar. I think I would like to take some questions now. I have a moderator to help me, and she had been writing the questions. I would, she or he had been writing the questions, and we had decided that we will merge the questions, and in the end take 3 or 4 questions and answer them. So let me have a quick look at the questions. Okay, so here's the first question.
How important is to follow up after submitting a motivation letter? And what's the best way to do it?
Okay, when you submit a motivation letter, you do not necessarily need to follow, because a motivation letter, here one thing is very important to mention. Where did you submit your motivation letter? So normally in most of the cases, when if it's an admission, or if it's a funded PhD position, or if it's a research position, when you submit your motivation letter, you should wait at least 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you could send an email to the professor or to the committee, but your email should be very short, maximum 2 lines or 3 lines, and the subject will be very specific. So this is very important because our students tend to write long emails. No, and the subject line is very vague. So write a very good, a catchy subject as well as a short email.
Do you have any advice for overcoming writer's block or getting started with the writing process? How to write motivation letter when you have a blank page in front of you and you don't know what to write?
Actually, what I did in the end with this exercise from reading from the PhD position ad, and then pointing it down one by one, this is how I recommend. So what I would do, I would search for the keywords. So the keywords was like molecular biology was a keyword. Let me give you another example of that is not from biology or microbiology. For example, if it's energy, so renewable sources, solar energy, I don't know more. So you take the keywords, and then you see where your experience or your education or your previous exposure of internship and stuff aligns there. You make points from keywords to points, 1 2 3 points, from points to short sentences, from short sentences to connect them together, and then build a story, and then proofread and improve, proofread and improve, proofread and improve. This is something that you will not learn in one day. You have to work on it quite a lot, and eventually you will master it. Next question.
This is my personal question. You have a lot of experience. People, like students coming from Pakistan, they don't have that much experience. And but you want to learn and you want to apply for that PhD position. And you are, when you see a position, you are motivated, but you don't have the lab experience, but you have a theoretical experience. So then how to persuade the
Yeah, this is something that I had personally experienced myself. I will just tell you a very short story. When I came to Sweden in many years ago, started my master's. The first time I was in the lab, we went there and it was like the lab instructor was, okay, today we are going to genetically engineer bacteria. I was like, wow. And they gave us a protocol that we had to follow. And when I went to the bench, I still remember the name of the lab technician. I was like, not the lab attendant. She was a PhD student. Molin was her name. I'm still in contact with her, to be honest. And I asked her, Molin, how do I use this pipette, micropipette? Because we never saw, we never. She was like, hey, you don't know how to use a micropipette? And I told her, this is actually the first time I'm holding one. I have seen in pictures. And then she told me, and then The first few weeks we were very weak. We were a few Pakistani students. I will talk about myself. But then after 4 or 5 weeks, Alhamdulillah, we were the best students in the university in that program. Why? Because we have a lot of theoretical background. So if your theoretical background is sound, if you have very good grasp on the theoretical background, doing it in the lab in practical is very easy. The technicians, they don't know what they are doing, but they can do it. So you can do it. Don't worry about if you do not have the lab experience. Don't worry if you do not have been exposed to these techniques. If you know about the principle, if you know about the theory, you just need a few hours to master these things with your hands. So no problem.
And in our CV, can we write those techniques in our skills if we only know the theory?
If you know the theory, then you do not know the skills. You can write the skill in the CV, but you write that I only have theoretical information. So write with this with the bracket. Never lie on your CV. Never, 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 never lie on your CV. I have seen people try to make things on the CVs that are not true. I have seen that. I'm sorry to say, people do that. Never do that. The person who's interviewing you might have more or 2 times the experience than your age. You cannot trick them. I would say stick to what you have. And if your CV and your what your CV says and what you really have, they are both true, you won't have any problem. You will find something for sure. Just stick to the truth. Never lie on your CV.
What is the most memorable or impactful motivation letter you have come across, and what made it stand out for you?
It's a very good question for someone.
No, it's my question.
Actually, I have a motivation letter from one of my students. I'm not going to name her. It's a female. She had quite a background. She's from a very rural region. And the motivation letter was written in a very nice way. And this is the reason why she's these days in somewhere out of Pakistan doing her thing. It's a doctorate or a PhD or a postdoc, I'm not going to tell you. But that was a motivation letter because she, I think, write it right out of her heart. It was actually a little longer as well. And when I studied that and I read that, I was like, maybe a little corrections are needed. Of course, with terrible English. I'm telling you, terrible English. There were a lot of terrible English mistakes, but that was the best motivation letter that I saw, I think, until now, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
And what made it stand out?
What made it stand out? She made it personal. She made it personal, as we discussed in our slides of the motivation letter, and she stated it in a way that she's telling the things to the persons sitting in right in front of them. The right narration style was that, and it was full of true motivation. And the way that girl sprang from a rural society with based on her own efforts, so all these things, true motivations, this is what I say, of course.
So this is the second last question. There are so many AI softwares available now. Do you think they can be helpful in writing a motivation letter?
This is a good question. I do not know how to answer that because I personally do not use any AI until now. I think I should, but I would say times are changing. People used to drive with diesel and automatic and petrol cars, gasoline cars. Now it's shifting to electric. So if you say no, I'm not gonna use electric car, you might leave behind. If I say I'm using YouTube, if I say no to YouTube, if I would say no to YouTube, I would left behind. I think a combination of the two would be nice. But if you rely too much on ChatGPT or other AI softwares, it's going to be a little bad for your mental development because maybe in writing the motivation letter, an AI software can help you. But when you get shortlisted and when you sit in an interview, and then you would be caught pretty badly. So I would say do not rely totally on the AI softwares. Maybe use a small fraction of it, just a small fraction. Majorly rely on your own efforts and rely on your own learnings. That will be helpful to you in the long run, because these AI softwares, though they people talk a lot about them, but they are not accurate. For example, so many websites say, "Oh, there's no plagiarism," but there is a lot of plagiarism problem in these softwares. I know this, and I had examples, eyewitnesses sitting one of them is sitting here. So just a bit of it. Use them, but not a lot.
The last question: will this video be available later?
This video will be available later on my YouTube, and I will also add the links of the handbook, and you can watch it anytime you want. Last thing before ending the webinar, I would say, if anyone has any questions, just write them in the comments, and I will try my best to come and answer them. And next time I'm going to have a webinar that would be based on just on CV. So like we will write a CV, because I found out if I do making a CV from scratch or a motivation letter, that's something that needs 2 hours alone. So we will just write a CV, and we will make an assumption of an imaginary person, and then we will try to make a CV, and then we will do it. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm really grateful to you. Many good wishes for you for your future success in your whatever field you are. Take good care of yourself, drink a lot of water, respect your elders, and enjoy your life. Bye bye.